Welcome to the Boxing Source Midweek Report, where we tackle the latest topics in the sport of boxing here up to this point every single Wednesday. Time to start the show. Yo, what's going on, everybody? What's happening? Here we are, Wednesday, September 24th, 2025. The Boxing Source Midweek Report. Checking in here. I'm still, adjusting to, the whole thing with the press conference that happened in New York City. There, the Palladium Theater in New York City, when it had Jake Paul and Tank Davis there, and then of course they had, another press conference there in Miami the next day, right? And we've had a number of things here that's been going on over the course of the past few days. Just building and building into more action that's coming up here in the sport of boxing within these, next couple of months or so, right? We got good action that's supposed to be planned out, for, November 8th, right? With Vergil Ortiz versus Erickson Lubin, right? And, also, what I had there for Jake Paul versus Tank Davis. So we're going to be talking about that. And also one fight that is on the undercard for Sebastian Fundora versus Keith Thurman. And that fight is for the WBC Super Welterweight Championship. But the co-feature bout will have the WBC Super Featherweight title on the line as O'Shaquie Foster faces Stephen Fulton. Of course, Stephen Fulton being a world champion at super bantamweight and also the WBC champion at featherweight. So we're gonna get into that also here in this particular edition of the Midweek Report. You know what I'm saying? Salute to brother Mar there in the building. You know what I'm saying? We got a few things that we're going to try to go through here in this particular edition of the Midweek Report. Now, the whole thing with that press conference that was at the Palladium Theater in New York City on Monday, right? One, I kind of like, was it, all too hot with having it, I guess what it was, around like 6 p.m. Eastern time. Usually the press conferences happen like earlier than that. Like it would be around, maybe like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, maybe 3 o'clock or something like that. But this one pretty much was at 6 p.m., right? And it kind of like had a whole little theme like it would be like past press conferences when it involved Tank Davis there. Now, the whole thing with the last fight that he had with Lamont Rose Jr. And they had, the whole thing with the press tour for that. Last time it was in New York City there, the Barclays Center. Those that were, in attendance for that, the media or whoever it was, y'all know how long it took for that thing to start and jump off. So, people was like, unsure about how this was going to go down. You know what I mean? But credit to both people. It started on time. It started at 6 p.m., right? And, I got to New York City. It was probably like about, what I say, about a couple of hours or, an hour and a half before it was supposed to start or something like that. Um, they had like the line there at the Palladium Theater. Boy, it was like a whole bunch of people, like all scrunched in like this that one little spot. So it's like media couldn't figure out which line to get on, or the people that wanted to be in the crowd or whatever, had to see if they could get through there or something. But they were able to sort itself out, and we were able to get that press conference to start on time there. So props on that front. You know what I mean? But I went, got through that press conference, and initially there for that New York press conference, it was like I wanted to, expect something kind of similar to, what you had for Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson last year. If y'all, go back, pretty much was like around a year ago at this time or something like that, right? Where you had Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, Apollo Theater. You had like whole DJ thing going on. You had what it was like little like drummer folks out there, doing some things, before it. But also had the whole thing with the co-feature bout, at least for that, where it was a rematch with Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. So that was kind of like a good thing to like accompany what you had for Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, right? Now, here with this one, at the time, we didn't necessarily know what the undercard was going to be at that point, right? So it was like, okay, they were going to feature Jake Paul, Tank Davis, and then that was going to be, what it was until we, would kind of figure out who would be involved in the undercard. Now, we were supposed to have one of those fighters that would be involved in the undercard be there, but didn't quite make it. So, I'll talk about that there a little bit later on that front, right? So, with that being said, you go through this press conference in New York City, right? You got Brian Custer there, okay? And I don't know what it is, man, but it just seemed like watered down. Just being real with y'all, just seemed watered down. There was like, that much energy behind it. Nothing to, get either of these, people going. You know what I'm saying? And it was like, I didn't know if they had just got out of bed or something, because they kind of like had a mellow attitude or something like that. You feel me? It was crazy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, shout out, man. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm just trying to be out there, do the work, be out there in media. This is what I would say a different type of era when it comes to media, right? Because when you come from like the print media type of thing, the print media or podcast type of stuff, like what I've been doing, to going over to this YouTube thing and incorporating podcasts to YouTube and incorporating that as well, it makes things very different. This is as they say, like the information age, the social media age, where everything is instant, and we didn't necessarily have that when, folks were, starting out in print media or something like that, right? So if like the people that have been involved in print media or like the early days of like the World Wide Web, I would say, right? Or Al Gore's internet, as they say, right? You didn't necessarily have them on camera a lot. They were just, doing their articles, tippity tapping on the not the typewriter, but the little laptops and all that type of stuff. Now you got people with a smartphone, cell phone, all that type of stuff now. So it's like, okay, hey, all they got to do is just have a camera on the cell phone or have the thing go live, and that's it. That's all you got to do, right? So now with that happening, it's like you get to see like a whole bunch of people making a bunch of posts, having information here and there, but at the same time, what that does is that makes things really difficult to decipher what's real and what's not. You know what I'm saying? So it kind of makes it very difficult for people to try to decipher all of that, man. Yeah. It says it was surprisingly boring. Yeah, man, he thought he was tripping. Man, I'm telling you, man. Hey, that's why I was like, yo, I didn't know what was up with the questions, and Brian Custer was asking or something like that, or whatever it was. And he talk about trying to build it up and everything like that. And they had the whole thing as far as like the backstory with Tank Davis, him having this thing there with his bout against Lamont Rose Jr. at the Barclays Center on March 1st, which, ended up being a draw. And it was, of course, controversial and everything like that. I mean, I was out there, covering the whole thing and stuff like that. So, I had asked questions to both Lamont Rose Jr. and the Tank Davis, and I had been talked about it for the past couple of months when it came to the end of that press conference there with Tank Davis and with what was it, Kevin Garcia or KG, or you got Ron Goodall there from Fight Hype. They were asking a thing there for Tank Davis as far as like what would be next for him, right? And at that time, Tank Davis said, "Hey, I would like for that fight to be next, but it's not going to be next." And folks was like, "Huh? What? What's going on here?" And he said, "Oh, so who could be the opponent? It could be Shakur." He's like, "Nah." It's like, "Yo, he's there in the locker room. Nobody really could have thought that it was Jake Paul until one of my main folks there, shout out to Matt Burns Boxing. He said, "Hey, maybe it is Jake Paul." You know what I'm saying? So, with that being said, you got the whole thing with, oh, there's supposed to be a rematch. There's supposed to go down between Tank Davis and Lamar Roach, but given the schedule that they had out there for PBC or Heyman Boxing or whatever it is, TGB Promotions, it didn't really kind of like seem all too good or all right, you know what I mean, for if it was going to be in August. If they were going to have the whole thing with Manny Pacquiao and Mario Barrios in July, how are they going to, put the, promote the thing in August like the next month over? So we have to see how that works. But as you see, that wasn't the move. That wasn't the plan. It went forward here with this thing with Jake Paul. Be a bigger bag for Tank Davis. I mean, it is what it is on that. But still, you had that whole thing with Lamar Roach Jr. out there. And Lamar Roach has had a lot to say about it. You know what I'm saying? And I've also heard from Lamar Roach Sr. about it too. So that in itself still has a lot to be sorted out, so to speak. But when it comes to this particular fight itself, yeah, man, it just seemed like the first one was flat, you know what I'm saying? And but you said to take Roach pressures were a little bit off too, though. Hey, man, I mean, I couldn't make most of what was going down, at least for those two that were in New York and DC. But the one in New York, though, for that Tank versus Roach, that was kind of crazy, going back and forth with Tank and Lamar Roach. And then Tank, going at, Lamar Roach's, crew that was out there for that. So, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, with this one, it was like, I didn't get much, from either one of these guys. It would have been something to like try to push for this fight to be like that whole thing of how they're trying to market it, right? Because if you got like a press release, so to speak, for this, you would say, okay, you got Jake Paul, who has been like one of the fastest rising stars within the sport of boxing, just starting off his career in 2020, right? And then on the other side, you got the guy that has been one of the top fighters out there, pay per view wise or numbers wise and everything. And they said, hey, these are the guys that kind of like are the favorites for Gen Alpha and Gen Z or something like that, right? But it just didn't kind of have that type of energy, didn't have that type of feel there initially, right? So yeah, I was like, yo, what's going down, man? Boxing Addict says that Tank Davis has been different recently compared to him versus Rolly. He's calmed down, but we'll see as I guess the fight gets closer, whatever it is. I mean, it's been completely different, since that, or after the his fight with Frank Martin, that he's kind of been, almost like, yo, all this stuff that I've been through, all the, this added attention and all that type of stuff. And, on top of, having the whole thing with the family, what, couple daughters, whatever it is. So he's like, yo, I really want to focus more on, family and everything like that. And, he's kind of said to, a few people, whether it's within his camp or those that he was, growing up with, was like, hey, this wasn't necessarily the plan to like say, hey, yeah, I'm going to go into this boxing game. I'm going to, get, these titles. I'm going to fight, for these titles here, try to be undisputed and all that type of stuff. It's like, nah, I'm just doing this because, I'm trying to figure out a way to get out of the situation that I'm in, currently, so basically this is like having the titles, being involved with, what is it, TMT, whatever it is, Mayweather Promotions, Leonard Ellaby, all that type of stuff, that, was one thing. And then eventually getting to the point where you're involved with Al Heyman, and then they take the step to make him the pay-per-view guy. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's something there that's kind of like added bonus, or so to speak, there when it comes to Tank Davis. It's almost like how people view Deontay Wilder, right? Deontay Wilder, when he came in the game, he was, just what, a couple of years off from, having, playing basketball, and then he said he's going to take up boxing, and then he went and competed in the Olympics, and he said, hey, this might be the way for me to, take care of my daughter at the time, back then, right? And then he eventually became the WBC heavyweight champion of the world. You feel me? So it's kind of like that same situation. And, that's the thing about it. It's like a lot of times when it comes to the sport of boxing, some people don't necessarily realize that these fighters get in the game not just for the glory of boxing, but hey, this is how I can make my money, son. You feel me? So if you have it in one view, right? Because I would say like, how would I put this? Fighters from some areas, right, get attention a different way for doing what they're doing to get money in comparison to other fighters from another section. I'll just put it that way. All right, you feel me? Shout out to brother Joe here in the building. What's good with you? Shout out to Tego. Salute to you. 2 Cents Boxing in the building. What's good? So yeah. So like for example, right? You could have a number of fighters that could be from, I don't know, man. Let's say Cuba, right? Or Mexico, as a lot of people would probably put Mexico or something, right? And they could win, they could win world titles, or they could be in a position to win a world title. But a lot of times we know about that backstory of how they're able to, get from, whether they're in Cuba, a lot of them defect from Cuba, they could be from Mexico, they could be from, I don't know, Guatemala or something like that. And they get into the boxing game and they get to a certain level and they're like, okay, I get to this level, then I could probably, get the money that I need in order to take care of my family. And when that's posed out to like the public or something like that, they're like, oh man, that's what's up. That's all cool. But if it's like someone that might be from this country that had hardships or whatever it is, and getting into the boxing game to do the same thing, they're kind of viewed a different way. So that's the thing about it, at least here with Tank Davis, so to speak, because if you, like I said, if that was not his intent to get into the game to be like, oh, multi-division world champion, pound for pound great, all that type of stuff, that's on Tank Davis. You feel me? But as we are in this particular age, you're gonna get criticized, either way. You feel me? But here, I guess this is, as some might say, a solid going up against Jake Paul. If the interest is there, if there's enough interest for it, then that's what we got. You know what I'm saying? And with Jake Paul, it was like, hey, what do we see like from earlier this year, right? Jake Paul was going after who? Canelo Alvarez, right? You also had the whole thing with Anthony Joshua, right? So it was more about having big, high-profile fights against, fighters that have been as viewed as maybe the face of boxing or the most popular fighters in the sport. So that's the thing that Jake Paul was going after in that particular sense. So he couldn't get something there with Canelo Alvarez, I bet. So you had the whole thing here with Tank Davis. So that's why I talked about the whole thing on March 1st with Jake Paul basically being out there at Barclays Center to initially propose that whole thing between him and Tank Davis here for that whole thing, right? But with that being said, you had the whole thing with New York's press conference, right? And, you had the thing with the media asking questions, and a couple of them were asking stuff about, with Tank Davis and him potentially, fighting, Teofimo Lopez or Shakur Stevenson, and he said, "Man, hey, man, y'all just gotta be fans and everything like that. Like, you don't have to worry about that." And on that front, it's almost like, really, he should have just said what basically it's been going down. But that's the thing. There sometimes you're not allowed, or you can't necessarily say what's been happening behind the scenes. I'm gonna just put it that way, man. Shout out to Thomas Hill there in the building, man. What's going on with you? But then you had one other question there before I stepped up, and or some dude that was on there, man. I don't even know who he was. He's like, man, listen, man, I love Jake Paul. I love what you've been doing, all this type of stuff, and Jake was like, bro, what is you talking about, bro? And he's like, no, 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 I love you too, Tank, and all that. And I'm like, oh, bro, man, this ain't it, right? This ain't it. So then, I went up there, man, and for me, I felt like this was like an obvious question to ask. To be honest with you, I thought this was an obvious question to ask, given that this is a fight between two guys that have had been around, like being the most popular fighters over the past 5 years or so, right? And initially, I thought, Brian Custer would kind of get more into it there with the questions that he had for both of those guys, but nope. So I had to, put it out there. But man, it was almost like they ain't hear me or nothing. So let me see if I can run it. Hey, Netflix, you better not get on me for playing this, because I'm the one to answer the question, all right? So I'm gonna run this again. I'm gonna run this here, and Netflix, you better not get on me for playing it, because I'm the one that asked the question. So here we go.
James Bell of the Boxing Source. This question is for both Tank and Jake. Given that y'all have kind of like had a meteoric rise to be very popular in the sport of boxing, and for this fight here coming up November 14th, for each of y'all, state your case for being the face of boxing.
Did you?
All right, say something.
Is it one of you? Is it for both of them?
For both of them.
What?
He wants you. He wants you to state your case.
State your case for being the face of boxing.
I ain't the face of boxing, fam. I'm just somebody that box.
Jake.
Numbers.
There you have it.
I mean, Tank was like, you know what I mean? He's like, hey, I'm not the face of boxing, fam. I'm just somebody that boxes. But I mean, it is what it is with that one. You feel me? Yeah, man. Yeah, it's a few things that's been going on behind the scenes, but I won't get too much into that. But yeah, with that particular question, man, I was like, yo, that should have been pretty obvious, because you got these guys that have been like, hey, okay, you have all of these people that have attended the fights there for Tank Davis, whether it's at the Barclays Center, whether it's over in Los Angeles, whether it's over in Atlanta or Washington D.C. or wherever, you know what I mean? And it was more of like, okay, if y'all are pretty much the most popular fighters in the sport outside of whether it had Canelo Alvarez on there or not, then kind of like show why you are the one that says, hey, I'm the most popular fighter out there in the sport right now. And well, they couldn't, they answered the way that they answered. Okay, so there was that on that front, right? The next day they had their press conference over in Miami. They had the thing with the undercard for that, and yeah, I don't know. What do y'all think about the undercard though? What do y'all think about the undercard? Because I thought I would have expected a little bit more out of it, but the other thing was, when I talked about this whole thing in the Boxing Source podcast, it said, hey, you know what? I'm thinking that they're gonna have a few fighters within MVP that are gonna be involved in this card. And Alicia Baumgartner was going to be one of them. Now, when they had the whole news about her, relinquishing the WBC belt, then that kind of like made it to where, okay, she wants to do 12 rounds and 3 minutes around and had the other titles on the line, okay, cool. But other than that, I was like, yeah. But yeah, we finally do get Gary Antoine Russell and Andy Hirooka landing on this particular fight card. Now, for me, that should be the co-feature bout without question. Okay, that should be the co-feature bout without question. But given it is Alicia Baumgartner, it is a most valuable promotions event, then that kind of like makes sense. But to me, also, what that does mean is like the whole thing with the pay, that could be something a little bit different too. By having Gary Antoine Russell versus Andy Hirooka and not be the co-feature bout. It said give her props for that. I think that she's doing the thing there with like how Amanda Serrano was doing. So it's not that much different than Amanda Serrano. Having her fights or a couple of fights that she had in her professional career where it was like try to do it 3 minute rounds or whatever or something like that. Might have been like outside of that though, because remember, Amanda Serrano wanted to have the fight with Katie Taylor as 3 minute rounds. She wanted to have that. So that was the thing about the whole joint. I think with Amanda Serrano, when she had her fight against Danila Ramos in Orlando, that was 3 minute rounds, and it was 12 round. It was a 12 round bout, right? So looks like they're trying to do the same thing here with Alicia Baumgartner, and she has her bout against Baduin, right? Leela Baduin, and that is the co-main event, right? But yeah, everyone's like looking forward to the thing there with Gary Antoine Russell making his first defense of that WBA super lightweight title against the mandatory challenger Andy Hirooka, right? For me, I'm like, hey, this should have been like already taking place, but they trying to find a date for it and everything like that. So you're gonna have there with Gary Antoine at 18 wins with just one lone loss, going up against Andy Hirooka there that's 24-0, right? So I think that is going to be a good scrap between those two fighters. They're around the same height and things like that. Now, with Hirooka, he has a reach to 74, but I have to see how he was fighting against like Ismael Barroso or Jin Sasaki, who was a former world title contender in the welterweight division, and yeah, he did get knocked out by he did get knocked clean out by Brian Norman Jr. You feel me? So we have to see like how Hirooka adjusts to having this fight, first world title fight for Andy Hirooka here, and it's going to be in Miami, Florida, right? So you got all of that. You also have there Ellie Scottney going up against Mayeli Flores there in this one. You're going to have your Casa Valle versus Yadira Bustillos and Avius Griffin going up against Cesar Francis. Now, Avius Griffin, of course, is coming off of his first loss of his pro career there where he got stopped. But some people thought that Avius Griffin would have a rematch, but I didn't think that was going to happen. I really didn't think that was going to happen there against Julian Rodriguez, and it wasn't like much there for that too. But we'll see how it goes though. You know what I mean? After this bout against Cesar Francis, if Griffin gets the win there, then we'll see if they kind of like revisit that, because I don't know what the plans are going to be here for Julian Rodriguez, because after that fight against Avius Griffin, he hasn't had another fight yet. So we'll have to see how that goes. Now, it was also announced that there will be even more bouts included on this card for November 14th. I'm not sure like who else will be included in that, but that's what you got here so far on that front. But I think it's going to be more most valuable promotions fighters that are going to be featured on that particular card for November 14th, right? So you do have that. That's what I got from it. Hopefully we get more interest. They say tickets are on sale now. They had the pre-sale yesterday, but now the general public can get tickets there for the Casilla Center in Miami, Florida, for all of that. Right now, for October 25th in Las Vegas, you do have that WBC Super Welterweight title on the line there with Sebastian Fundora defending that title against Keith one-time Thurman. Right now, Sebastian Fundora, at least for me, has been probably the most impressive fighter as of right now at 154 pounds. Had the initial win against Tim Tszyu for the WBC and WBO titles last year, right? But then, we had to wait it out for the rest of the year. Yeah, he could have been back to have another fight, but didn't necessarily have that. You had the whole thing about him potentially fighting Terrence Crawford, as Terrence Crawford was like the WBO mandatory, but we knew that Terrence Crawford was looking for bigger and better things at that point. So that fight didn't happen. We didn't see Sebastian Fundora back in the ring until this year, at the Mandalay Bay, basically, right? Because he had to wait that out and then see if they could get a fight. So he had a defense against Cordell Booker, was able to get a stoppage win there against Booker. Then some people thought he would have had another defense against the WBO mandatory challenger at the time, Xander Zayas. But when it was proposed that Fundora could face Tim Tszyu once again, and it would be more money on the table, you just took that. You can go ahead and have that WBO title and fight for that WBO title. So Fundora fought Tszyu again, beat him up. Okay, so now this is his next fight. So that's 3 fights here already this year for Sebastian Fundora, with him going up against Keith Thurman. But co-feature bout, you're going to have the WBC Super Featherweight title on the line as O'Shaquie Foster defends that title against the WBC Featherweight champion, Stephen Fulton. And, that press conference that they had initially for, these guys, the main event, the co-feature, you had like a little bit of back and forth talk between, O'Shaquie Foster and Stephen Fulton. And O'Shaquie Foster, basically was going in there like, yo, why am I over here? And what I mean by that is he was there next to Keith Thurman, and Keith Thurman is, the number 2 in the main event, right? So if it's O'Shaquie Foster defending the title, he should be on the number 1 side, which would have been like, the left side if you were, viewing the camera, right? But no, it was almost like he said, hey, y'all like viewing this as like, Stephen Fulton versus O'Shaquie Foster. No, I'm the champ. I'm the one that's defending the title. So you should be having me, basically first in this. So that I guess that carried over here in this conference call that happened earlier today, right? So, Foster's pretty much like been on that energy, like, people still like disrespecting me, they overlooking me, all that type of stuff. And while, I've been able to be, world champion, I've, had some key wins in my professional career, particularly recently, against Ray Vargas. He had to, go through what he went through in his bout against Eduardo Hernandez there in Mexico. Those scorecards was crazy, right? And then after that, you had 3 split decision fights, right? Nova got the win. The initial one with Conceição, that was a loss. That shouldn't have been a loss. That was a clean win. Clean win by O'Shaquie Foster. But then they ran it back, and he got that WBC belt back. So now he defends that title here against Stephen Fulton. And Fulton, had his win over Brandon Figueroa on February 1st. And so, it's about him, just going up here to this next division. He's kind of like been, at 122, around 122 for the majority of his career before he moved up to 126. But the thing about it is like once you get to a certain point of your professional career, sometimes that could be a brief stop. If you can't necessarily make the weight comfortably, or you don't feel like you'll be at your optimal self if you try to like get to a certain weight class. So for Stephen Fulton, he's like, you know what? I'll just be here at 130. I'm going to go after the WBC champion here at 130 pounds. And then after that, we'll see what's going on. We'll see what's going down. You feel me? But, with that one as well, we had a couple of questions out there for each one of them. I was able to, ask what I could ask to both fighters. So I'm going to run that here real quick for y'all to check out. So here we go. My first question here is for Shockey Foster. In the press conference, you said, like, I'm going to show everyone who's doubting me. And once I show everyone what I'm really about, there won't be any questions about me. Now, for this upcoming fight here against Stephen Fulton, like, what are you going to show to the people and yourself there as far as, like, proving yourself to be one of the best super featherweights in the world?
I just plan on showing a new wrinkle to my game. Well, not a new wrinkle, but, we could say I had a rough last year, I guess. Yeah, we could say that, you know what I mean? And I just feel like ever since then, people just feel like I ain't been worthy of being a champion, or like I won the belt on accident or whatever. So, being that people think stuff sweet, and I know my potential, I know my ability. I made some changes over the last few months and everything. So I just plan on y'all gonna see a different me when I go out there this time. It's gonna be the sharpest, the best fight out y'all that I've been. You know what I mean? So I'm just looking forward to it.
Gotcha. And my question for Stephen Fulton, like we talked at the press conference, after the press conference for your rematch against Brandon Figueroa, and you talked about that moment of clarity after your loss to Naoya Inoue, and how you're approaching, your career from this point forward as like as you said, to not give an attitude here. So do you think that's kind of like really made you be more, I would say, you know what, I'm good, so I don't really have to care about what anybody says. I'm gonna just do me.
That I still not giving the attitude, or what I say?
Yeah, not giving a fuck, man. I would just say not giving a fuck. You feel me?
Yeah, that is no, but no, yeah, man. That's what carries me on now, bro. You don't care about what people say. Just don't care about it. Like when you put too much energy in that, you put too much energy into the wrong things. It's like nothing that these people say is gonna matter. You gotta think about where we're at and what we're doing and the height of our careers. World champions 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 2 weight division. The things that we accomplish and things that these people who are constantly bashing us fighters are accomplishing is like night and day. They're not nowhere near us, financially or accomplishment wise. So it's like once I understood this is what these people are supposed to do, because we're the entertainers. Like we're still in the entertainment business. Like when you look at it that way, you're just like, man, don't. You start to keep your mouth shut, man. Just don't even worry about it. Go in one ear, out the other. So
yeah, there you go, man. Yeah, I was able to, get more from Shockey Foster and Stephen Fulton there in that particular conference call. Hey, the thing with Shockey Foster, I'm gonna tell you, man, he is like one of the toughest people to try to get in touch with, to try to set up any type of interviews or questions or anything like that. So, at least I was able to get one question there for Shockey Foster. And then there was Stephen Fulton. I kind of like was trying to, be a little bit clean there, but he was like, yo, I heard that. I heard what that question was. He was like, nah, that ain't what I said. So I was like, man, fuck it. He's like, you don't give a fuck. He's like, yeah. So that's the thing about it. I think there was Stephen Fulton on his side. It's a different type of approach there for Stephen Fulton, after his loss to Naoya Inoue, because even with the whole thing of him being able to be like a unified champion in the super bantamweight division, having those multiple tough fights that he did have at 122 pounds, that kind of like had him, be considered among, the pound for pound rankings at the time before he had that loss to Naoya Inoue. And then after that one loss, it was like, a lot of people wrote him off or just dismiss him and things like that. So that's why we had to get himself back in the game and have the first have the fight against Carlos Castro, which in a sense was a very close fight. Some people may have thought that he could have lost that one there, but then going up against Brandon Figueroa this year, having that win, pretty much like outpointing Brandon Figueroa, that was like, that was easy. That was an easy win. I know that O'Shaquie Foster said that he felt like Fulton did better in the first fight against Figueroa than the second one. Nah, I had to disagree with him on that one. Like Figueroa really didn't have much at all here in this second fight. So for Fulton getting that clear decision win to become the WBC featherweight champion, now he's trying to be a 3-division champion here if he gets this win over O'Shaquie Foster. So that's going to be a very solid fight there in a co-feature bout for Fundora versus Keith Thurman. That's going to be at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, October 25th. Of course, you got Jesus Ramos Jr. They're going up against Shane Mosley Jr. there for the WBC interim middleweight title. And then Isaac Lucero is going up against Roberto Valenzuela Jr. Also on that card. There's going to be a few more fights that they'll be added on the card here later on. I mean, we're just like a month away from all that. So you'll probably see more, there on that front. You feel me? So there you have all that. And then upcoming here for, what is that? November 8th, there in Texas, man. This is going to be a really, really good one there when you have Vergil Ortiz Jr. going up against Erickson Lubin. Of course, Vergil Ortiz being the WBC interim champion there at 154 pounds, right? So now you got the whole thing there with all that. And you got this here with the fight card, right? You're going to have Floyd Schofield Jr. going up against Jojo Diaz Jr. You got Joshua Edwards there, the heavyweight division, going up against Zito Voris, and Darius Fulgham there going up against David Stevens. Now, the thing is that, they had the press conference yesterday. That is why, we didn't necessarily have the real boxing with Coach Roddy Shields, because Roddy is there with Joshua Edwards and David Stevens, right? So you did have that press conference. First off, you had, David Stevens and Darius Fulgham in there. You also had Joshua Edwards there, of course, pretty much has had about like 5 or 6 fights already, so to speak, or it seems like it here. And this is like his first year as a professional, right? So this one, there'll be his 5th bout that he'll have coming up. And, it'll probably be some there. It'll probably end up being easy work or whatever it is. You feel me? But, at least, he's trying to get as active as possible. As, Coach Roddy Shields said, Golden Boy and Oscar La Hoya want Joshua Edwards to have pretty much like 9 or 10 fights within the first 12 months of his career. Probably even more than that. So here with Joshua Edwards getting back in the ring here, his last bout was in August there against Cayman Audi. That was like a 1-round, technical knockout. So he's only, he's had 4 fights, 4 knockout wins. No bout has gone, longer than 2 rounds there on that front, right? So, you're trying to see what's going on with Joshua Edwards, of course, coming from Houston, Texas. So it's not that far, for him going from, Houston to Dallas area for his next particular fight, right? And then you got the whole thing there, as I mentioned there, with Darius Fulgham and David Stevens there. So that's going to be a good bout that, to look forward to there in the super middleweight division. Now, you had the thing with Fulgham. His last bout was May 30th against Bek the Bully, Bekbatir Belikuziev, and he lost by unanimous decision. He went down in the 12th round of that fight. That was a really good fight, though. It was a close fight, really good fight. Some probably would have said, hey, maybe, Fulgham should have been able to do a little bit more there against Bekbatir and get the win, but didn't necessarily happen. But now he's, trying to get back in the mix here going up against David Stevens. David Stevens, is a really, really good fighter to go up against there with a record of 15-2, 10 of those wins by way of knockout. Did have a unanimous decision win in his last bout against Petr Kubakov. Yeah, it's Petr Kubakov, right? And got a unanimous decision win on that one. Handed Kubakov his first professional loss. So you have that as a very good scrap there that's going to be on that card. And Floyd Schofield Jr. versus JoJo Diaz. I mean, you have what you have there with that. Floyd Schofield, being a top contender there within the WBA rankings at lightweight. Of course, he had his his knockout win over Tevin Farmer. Was like, quick work, as they say, easy work. But a lot of people were surprised about that, given Tevin Farmer's style. He has a very difficult style, but here in this one, hey, Floyd Schofield was able to do his thing and get that quick win. You know what I mean? So now, he has this here against JoJo Diaz. JoJo Diaz had what? That bout that was a really, really surprisingly good bout against Regis Prograis. It was surprisingly good, right? He ended up losing by unanimous decision, but he made it like much closer than people would have thought it would have been, right? So I guess they, giving up another one here against Floyd Schofield Jr. and stuff like that. But we got to see what happens here on that front. Now, have one of my great guests here that's about to join here on this midweek report, right? Of course, resident chef here, here on the Boxing Source, checking in. TTP, TTP promotions and everything like that. Brother Terrell is here joining us here. What's good, Terrell?
Hey, what's going on, man? Just want to jump in for a quick minute just to see what's going on with the great sport of boxing, which we love.
Yeah, man. I mean, we had the whole thing with the press conferences with, Tank Davis and Jake Paul. They did just have one here with the Vergil Ortiz versus Erickson Lubin fight that's coming up November 8th. And I kind of like talked about an upcoming bout in October 25th between O'Shaquie Foster and Stephen Fulton for the WBC super featherweight titles there. So there's a lot of action that's coming up here within these next couple of months here. So just talking about all of that and just wanted to get thoughts on these fights that are coming up.
Yeah, that last fight you just mentioned with O'Shaquie Foster and Stephen Fulton, very interesting in the outcome of that fight. Two different styles in a sense. We know what Fulton got the Philly style, and O'Shaquie Foster is your classic boxer. Good speed, good ring generalship, things like that. But we know Stephen Fulton, even though Stephen Fulton's coming up in weight, it's not that much of a difference. And on top of it, it's not that O'Shaquie Foster has a lot of power on top of it. He's a classic boxer. Mm-hmm. And Stephen Fulton is also a boxer too, but he will be the bigger man, even though he's coming up in weight. And what's kind of odd in a sense, when you really see that when someone moves up in weight, they're naturally the bigger fighter. So I'm very interested in that chess match and how that works out. So that's definitely going to be a very entertaining fight. Definitely.
Yeah, and it seems like it's very even between these two fighters. They're at least with the odds, they pretty much like have it even with both of these guys. Of course, as I mentioned, they were Stephen Fulton being a multi-division champion, being a unified champion there at super bantamweight, being the WBC champion at featherweight. Now, trying to be a champion in a third weight class here if he gets a win over O'Shaquie Foster. But O'Shaquie Foster was able to win that WBC belt, defended it a couple of times, and had a controversial loss there to Rosen Conceição, but then, was able to win it back. So now it's like, okay, what is he going to do here in this particular fight against Stephen Fulton to kind of like show, okay, yeah, I should be mentioned as one of those guys to be at the top of the super featherweight division. And that's what, I kind of like asked him there in the conference call earlier today.
And even when you jump into that fight a little bit more, we look back a few fights ago for Stephen Fulton when he got mollywop by anyway, right? So there's no shame in that. Of course, you always want to win your fights, but there's no shame in that loss. In regards to who he lost to, a top 3 pound for pound fighter in his generation, in his era right now. But sometimes when you lose, of course, there's always dignity in your loss, but you can learn stuff about yourself going forward. And when I look at Fun's loss to anyway, what's the kid name he bit twice? Mexican he beat twice.
That's Brandon Figueroa.
Yep, Figueroa. So in those fight, and the first fight was definitely a good back and forth on that one. Yeah. And what I'm getting at is those past few fights that Funda's had has brought him here to this moment. And I know they have it even for a while, but I would not be surprised to see if this is a bit I don't want to say one-sided. I was going to Osheki his respect as being a champion, but I think Fulham's experiences will come to fruition here, and basically he's going to get the win tonight. Win tonight. And like I said, I won't be surprised if this is more of a kind of one-sided affair in that regard.
I mean, for me, I think it's kind of even there. Around the same age. Probably have like the same. I wouldn't necessarily say the same height. They got Foster as a taller fighter and everything like that. So for me with Fulton, is that he's been around that 122 pound division for the majority of his career. So for a long time, he's had to get down to 122 pounds. So when he did have his fights at 126, it was like the one fight against Carlos Castro and then the rematch against Brandon Figueroa. So then that's just 2 fights at 126 before having this bout here against Chucky Foster at 130 pounds. So for me with Stephen Fulton, I got to see if it's something to where he's like, I'm not necessarily going to push myself to try to get down to 126 for the next fight, regardless of who was going to be against. Let me see if I could try to see how I looked at 130 and then challenge a world champion at 130 at the same time. So he kind of like mentioned that also, that like, hey, it's not like, I'm facing like anybody, just anybody at 130. I'm facing a world champion here at 130 pounds.
And what's kind of funny, what you just said, coming down, and we just had a recent super fight. We know, well, one opponent didn't have to come down as far as low as he has to get to in Terence Crawford. That was a big part of the back and forth in the coverage of that fight. So he's moving up in weight. No, he doesn't have to lose as much weight. So in that fight, we saw Crawford go down. Like I said, probably walked around 180, 85 at the most, something like that.
180, 185 is probably max, but I'd say around 180.
Yeah, even here with Fulton, I'm just to take a guess. Probably walks around 140, 45, and same thing. Doesn't have to come down as much, so he's not going to be as drained. So on paper, he should be stronger on paper. So
that's the thing that I'm looking at there with Stephen Fulton. So when he's doing work out there in Philadelphia there with Coach Bosley, Anderson, and all those other guys there at the dungeon or whatever it is, new dungeon, then he doesn't necessarily, Fulton doesn't necessarily have to worry about cutting down weight that much. It's more about, him sharpening his tools, sharpening his skills and everything like that to, be prepared for a bout of this magnitude here against Oshaki Foster. So, definitely looking forward to that. And then, as I was mentioning there before, you joined in, we had this fight card here for November 8th in Dallas. They're headlined by Vergil Ortiz Jr. versus Erickson Lubin. And you're going to have Floyd Schofield Jr. going up against Jojo Diaz, Darius Fulgham against David Stevens, and Joshua Edwards there against Zeno Voris. So, we had the whole thing with the press conference. Erickson Lubin, kind of like came in there, approaching it like, hey, props to, Vergil Ortiz Jr. But, the way that they're like promoting this, it's almost like, I'm a like a small letter B, not like a capital B side, but like a small letter B with how, they had the poster. He was there. He was like ripping the poster. He didn't like it, so he ripped it apart. You know what I'm saying? And it's almost like he's almost in a prove it type of fight here against Vergil Ortiz Jr. But given his experience, given his fights against Sebastian Fundora or against Jesus Ramos Jr., it's almost like people are kind of like writing them off again. So this one is going to be really, really interesting, for both fighters because you got Erickson Lubin that's been there at the 154-pound division his entire career. Had his world title opportunity against Jamel Charlo. Man, it's been 8 years when he had that opportunity there for a world title. So it's crazy that it's been that long since he's kind of like fought for a world title there on that front. But this is like the second attempt at the interim title there for the WBC for Erickson Lubin, this time against Vergil Ortiz Jr. So it's going to be a really, really good fight.
What's the age difference between you two?
So you got Erickson Lubin there that's at 29, right? Vergil Ortiz is there at 27.
All right. So with that said, well, there's no age, there's no big gap in age. That's evident right there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you just remind me of what Lubin been through, the flash knockout to Charlo, the war with Fundora, and just on top of that, getting back to the spot, he's definitely not a small B-side. Definitely not at all. He's been there. He's been right there in the division for quite some time, right?
Yeah.
And we know that fight against Charlo is really put him in a big setback. We know that, right?
Yeah.
But he has definitely climbed back to be into the position that he's in right now. And on top of that, he says his second attempt for an interim title. This guy's hungry. He's coming to fight. He's coming to prove himself. He's coming to grab his opportunity. So I sure hope that Vergil Ortiz does not take him lightly at all. Not at all. And not that I've ever seen Vergil Ortiz take a night off like that. Who has a good, tremendous come forward style, aggressive boxer, things like that. But like I said, hope they don't take Lubin light because this dude's hungry. He's trying to seize his opportunity, especially now in this division. Fundora has 2 belts, right?
Oh, he has one. Remember, he relinquished that WBO belt.
Okay, that's right.
With Samuel Zayas now having the WBO title.
So that means IBF and WBC is available, right?
IBF, you got the thing there with Bakum Brazaliev, and WBA is like they recently elevated Abbas Barao to be the WBA champion.
Yeah, that's the belt that Crawford had, right?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I mean, to be on the verge of getting a title, this dude, Lubin needs to seize his opportunity. Plain and simple. And Lubin's road has not been easy, not at all. So it just ain't nothing new for him. So right now for me is put up or shut up and just seize his opportunity. And like I say, he's definitely not a small B-side. This guy's a major factor in 154, definitely.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I had to see if I could find the thing there for where the heck the flyer is, man. Because it had it. Let me see here, man. Hopefully they got the clip. Yeah, I want to see the clip. So I'm gonna see if I can share that thing here with the moment where he ripped it, man. Yeah, like Bison Wiz said, man, he like ripped the flyer. So hopefully they got the thing there with Erickson Lubin there, man. So he should have it here on this front. All right, bet. So we got him ripping the poster. Let's see. Yeah.
There's a little disrespectful to me and my team. They got me somewhere in the dark somewhere, like Vergil has moved all over me and stuff like that. But this is disrespectful. I don't like it. It's disrespectful to me and my brand. But November 8th, it will be fireworks. I want everybody to tune in live on the Zone. It will be a special fight. It's a great matchup. I tip my hat to Vergil Ortiz and his team. And tune in.
There you go, man. You ripped the flyer, man, because it's like that's disrespect. You feel me? Like it should be like, hey, I'm a well-established fighter there in the 154-pound division. As I said, was able to challenge for a world title there, also for that interim title. And this is gonna be really interesting there with Vergil Ortiz Jr. Given that he's had fights against Frederick Lawson, last year, Thomas Delorme last year. But then you had the fight against Sergey Boychuk where he ended up getting knocked down twice. And it took like a majority decision where, some people probably thought that Sergey Boychuk could have got the win there in that particular fight. But then his fight against Israel Badrimov that he had on February 22nd in Riyadh, he was, a lot better, I think a lot sharper there in that particular bout against Badrimov. It was able to get the unanimous decision win. But here going up against a crafty guy like Erickson Lubin, to me, it almost seems like how Lubin was kind of like being built up as the B-side to Jesus Ramos Jr. when they had that fight. That would have been like back in September 2023, right? So it almost seemed like Jesus Ramos Jr. was being built up as the next guy at 154 pounds. Undefeated record, had been, beating a number of young guys or young contenders or whatever it is. So then they said, hey, let's put him up here against Erickson Lubin. And then after this fight, if he beats Erickson Lubin, then you could, put him like right up there as one of the top contenders at 154 pounds. And Erickson Lubin was like, yo, y'all trying to get me set up. I'm like, no, I ain't having that. You feel me? So he outputted, Jesus Ramos. And for me, for that fight, I felt like it was like Jesus Ramos, what it showed the inexperience that Jesus Ramos has as far as like, coming forward, trying to cut off the ring, throwing punches, while trying to cut off the ring. So he allowed Erickson Lubin to get his offense going while fighting off the back foot and still was able to move around the ring for the majority of the fight. That's why I felt like Erickson Lubin was able to get the decision win on that. You know what I mean? So that being said, he's kind of like been trying to build his way back up. He had the fight there against Andre Holmes Jr. earlier this year in Kissimmee, Florida. Some people thought that he would have been right there in line to fight for the IBF title there with Bakhmut Azaliev. But, I mean, when you got, Erickson Lubin that's pretty much under, what am I say? Pro box, so to speak, right? And with Bakhmut Azaliev under main events, they ain't necessarily going to have that much money behind that fight, even though it's a world title fight. And also, where you're going to have that, basically put on the televised or whatever. So, even when I was like, talking with Erickson Lubin a couple of, months ago, it was like, hey, he's still trying to set up the fight, but hey, if the money ain't there, then, it is what it is, right? So then you had this whole thing here with Vergil Ortiz Jr. over in Dallas. You probably get a little bit more money, and you get like another opportunity with that interim title there. So he's like, yo, better off with that. Now, I have something there with Bakhmut Azaliev up here in a bit, but it's like when you have someone like a Azaliev that isn't really much of a name, doesn't really kind of like garner that much attention, then you're not going to get those opportunities that you will like against those more notable fighters at 154 pounds. Boxing Wiz is, as who's your pick for Foster versus Fulton? I'm probably live betting after round 3. It looks close. I'll just say, yeah, just keep with that live betting after round 3 because right now these odds is absolutely even for both sides. And it's a 50-50 fight for me. It's 50-50 fight. You know what I mean? I can't necessarily pick at this point. So if you try to put in something towards that fight, yeah, wait until the first couple rounds go down because right now you ain't getting anything back if you try to put in money on the money line right now. It ain't cool. You feel me? But back to the thing there with Erickson Lubin. Like I said, this is gonna be a real interesting fight for Vergil Ortiz Jr. to me because I did see like a couple of flaws that he had in this fight against Sergey Boychuk. He looked a little bit improved there against Israel Madrimov, but we're going to see here for sure against Erickson Lubin that knows how to fight, going backwards. He has the height, he has the reach, and he could, make it really, really, troublesome for Vergil Ortiz Jr. Now with Vergil Ortiz Jr. though, he's kind of using his jab a little bit more while coming forward and trying to cut off the ring. So he's gonna, try to see if he can get within range of Erickson Lubin and try to land as many punches as he possibly can on that front. So it makes for a very good fight coming up there on November 8th under Golden Boy Promotions. Some people, asked if I was going to try to apply for it, but man, I'm telling you, this stuff, I'm telling you, it costs, yo. So if I do it, then we'll see. But I don't know if I'm gonna be able to try to get out there. We'll see how it goes here because we got, of course, what's coming up for October with Jerome Boots. It is having his fight against Luis Felipe in Philadelphia. So you got that coming up next month. Folks, as I mentioned, there with October 25th in Las Vegas. That's another thing to look forward to. So we got a number of good events coming up here, pretty soon for y'all fight fans to look forward to on that front, man. So
and even just a small footnote with Lubin,
yeah,
still with the same trainer, and that shows continuity within that camp, continuity within that corner. That's always meaningful and sometimes overlooked these days.
yeah, for sure, man. You got to have that consistency in the camp, man. Because I mean, hey, for example, talking about the thing there with Sebastian Fundora, he had his wins over Tim Tszyu, right? Tim Tszyu had recently, made the announcement that he's going to be changing his team up, so maybe he's going to, have a few things to switch things around and then see if he could get back in the mix there, I guess, at 154 pounds. Now, for me, given his losses to Bakum Murtazaliev and then the latest loss to, Sebastian Fundora, I don't know what he could do here at this particular point. Just being honest with you on that. Boston Will says staying away from Lubin Ortiz. It could go either way, as he says Lubin is a live underdog. Yeah, man, I'm telling you, he is. But I mean, right now on the FanDuel, it says Vergil Ortiz Jr. is at 6.5 to 1 favorite, and Erickson Lubin is like a 4-1 underdog on FanDuel. I'm sorry, those odds should be much closer than that. It should be
4-1. That's crazy.
That's crazy, man. Like yeah, that's not giving respect to Erickson Lubin at all, there, bro. So hey, I don't know, man. I might have to think about putting something on Lubin for that one. Because man, that's just way too high of a favorite there for
Yeah.
Vergil Ortiz Jr. on that front. You know what I mean? But that's mostly what I had here for this version of the Midweek Report. Salute the brother Terrell here in the building for chiming in on what's been going down here with Inboxing. We got a few things that's going to be coming up here for, I guess, the Boxing Source podcast. I'm going to see if I can set up an interview there with with one fighter or trainer or something like that for Sunday. We'll see if we can work on that. But we got a few other things in the works here for the Boxing Source. As I mentioned, I still have the project for the trading cards still in the works. But I might have to make a little bit of a decision there on that front here really soon because I have to look at who I have that I could pretty much distribute on that front, and then make a few phone calls, do a little bit of networking, and get some more fighters and people involved to be part of that as well. So y'all be on the lookout for that. And that's what I got there, man. Hey, brother Terrell, you got anything else on it?
Yeah, so I just saw a clip on the latest clip for the Tank Jake Paul face off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just you can be brief. Just in summary, how does this fight transpire inside in the ring? And the reason why I say that because on this last post I just saw about the latest face off, where I think Tank pushed him and stuff like that, and Jake is being Jake. Jake is being Jake on top of that. So in the ring, my concern is at what point does Tank really get pissed off and turn to a real fight? and if that does happen, what happens from that point then?
Yeah. Everyone, kind of like is, there with it being an exhibition and kind of, want to stay away from it. But you still want to see if there's going to be a moment of sorts there for this particular encounter. And I don't see it like, much different than, when you had Floyd versus Logan Paul, sometime back in their exhibition. That, maybe you could have some type of moment where people will be like, oh my gosh, this happened. You know what I'm saying? So I think there with Tank, I think we might see something there with him. And as he was saying in the New York press conference, he's saying like this is the first one where I feel like I'm kind of like clear, free, and don't have like any type of outside distractions or anything like that. So I guess he's gonna be more about okay, this is something where I'm gonna have fun with this. You feel me? But at the same time, if Jake Paul gets like out of line, he's
Yep.
going to show like, okay,
Yep.
you got to understand that I've been training and I've been sparring like guys your size and even larger than that, and being able to hurt them too. So, whatever you have, I'm gonna be ready for all of that. Whatever you try to pull, I'm gonna be ready for all of that. So that's the thing there with Tank Davis on that front.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that because I think Jake will be in there clowning a little bit, and we'll get to the point where he's doing too much, and Tank be like, all right, don't get it twisted.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying? He's still, as some would say, he's still from Baltimore. You know what I mean? So you don't want to have that type of thing, type of moment come up with that all of a sudden. You feel me? So that's the thing on that, man. So yeah, that's what I had on that front. And kind of like sum up what's been going down here through the midweek report. As I mentioned there, you had the whole thing with the Tank versus Jake press tour. You had like press conference there for Vergil Ortiz Jr. and Erickson Lubin, and talk about the thing there with had a conference call to promote O'Shaquie Foster versus Stephen Fulton. That's a co-feature for Sebastian Fundora versus Keith Thurman. That's going to take place on October 25th in Las Vegas. So number of fights for y'all to look forward to. We'll stay, keeping the loop there as far as like the schedule is concerned. I got to do a lot of work when it comes to the website. I've been slacking on that big time. One of the things I'm gonna try to do on the website is have an update from one of the matchmakers for Top Rank there in Brad Goodman. Was able to ask a few questions to him. So he provided some answers as far as like what's going down with some of the fighters within Top Rank, and some that may be involved with Top Rank, and some that might not be involved with Top Rank. So that's one thing that we're going to be doing on the Boxing Source website here pretty soon. So y'all be on the lookout for that. And that's pretty much what I have here on this front. Biggest for everyone that's been able to listen live here for the midweek report. And I will catch y'all later. Peace out.
All right, boss.